Right. Bonjour tout le monde. Hello, everyone. My name is Jennifer West, and I am the artistic director of Muse West Concerts and also the host of our podcast, Take Note. And it is my pleasure today to welcome my very good friend and composer and pianist, Ian Cusson, who is normally in Toronto, but is not in Toronto today. We're actually in the same time zone, but separated by a ferry ride. Before we begin our conversation, I would like to recognize that I am hosting today's podcast from the traditional ancestral territories of the Coast Salish nations of Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish. And I think that it's important for us to think about where we're situated each day and how we walk carefully as we've just passed Earth Day, and how all of my conversations with Ian are really just a chance to learn and talk together. And I really appreciated that. And I think that we want to honor that sense of space today. So Ian, where are you today?
Wow. Well, I just want to echo, I feel like all of our conversations are the same for me. I think I love any exchange where we can share and learn from one another. So I love this. Well, I'm in beautiful Victoria, in the lobby of the Royal Theatre here. And I'm about to have a performance of another work. So it's great to get to chat with all of you from another place of artistic art making. I love being on the West Coast. I live in Ontario, as you know, but it's just one of the most magical and wonderful places out here. And I can see why a lot of people come here and then never leave.
Even though the housing prices keep us very restricted, we somehow keep staying. But Toronto is in competition for those housing prices these days, so
Indeed. Yeah.
For sure. We like to start our conversations with rapid fire questions where you have to just answer the first thing that comes to your mind.
Perfect.
Poetry or novel?
Novel.
Okay. All right. Very good. And after a concert, wine or beer?
Wine.
Okay. There we go. And last question, Ravel or Debussy?
Oh, that's impossible. Oh gosh, Ravel. Oh gosh, it's impossible.
Impossible.
Can I just leave that as that answer?
Yes.
Both wonderful for many different reasons.
They are. They are both great. So, Ian, we are so excited for this piece that is going to be premiered by Asita Tenekun and Lastala. Asita is a wonderful tenor based here in Vancouver, and Lastala is the conductor of the Vancouver Opera and a fantastic pianist, also based here in Vancouver. Can you tell us a bit more about this song cycle you've written? Who wrote the texts? What can we kind of expect from the piano part? We're really excited.
Oh gosh, well, I'm equally excited to share this work with the Muse West audiences. So the song cycle is called Love Songs on Poems of Michael Ondaatje. And so right there you get the text writer, the incredible, incomparable Michael Ondaatje, who is, of course, a Canadian treasure, Sri Lanka born, and has lived in Canada and made his career here. Known for his novels. I mean, The English Patient, probably the most famous, especially with the movie adaptation in the 90s, I guess, the 1990s. But his body of poetry is just also some of the most stunning use of language that I've come across. And for the longest time, I really wanted to work with his texts and to create a piece of music based on some of the poems. One of the poems in particular, I remember reading in the 1990s, was called The Cinnamon Peeler. And I just thought, oh gosh, this would make such a gorgeous setting. And I actually mentioned this to our friend Asita Tenekun. And I said, have you ever read this great poem? And he's like, oh, I've wanted to have a musical setting of that for a long time. And I said, okay, let's find an opportunity to have a project together where I write a song cycle for you, maybe based on all Michael Ondaatje poems. And we kind of scoured his work and found 4 delicious poems, including the Cinnamon Peeler. They're actually all from the same collection, which is called the Cinnamon Peeler, a kind of collection of his poetic work. And here we get this new work that's going to be premiered in May.
We are so grateful to Ian for composing this beautiful new work. It was truly a pleasure for us to have support from the Canada Council to do this project. Merci au Conseil des Arts du Canada. We're so grateful for that. And I think that we were talking with Asita yesterday about this project and how evocative the text is. And I can't wait to hear how that comes to life in melody and harmony and texture and all of the musical elements.
Well, I mean, one of the really interesting things in thinking about a song cycle, an extended work that has, in this case, poems that are very different one from the next, but we've assembled them in such a way that hopefully you see some of the thematic or the threads that run between them. There's threads of kind of love and almost a gentle eroticism that is in these poems, but also images like swimming and water and these other very sensual in the sense of sense, like smells, tastes, that are all that really bring these poems to life. So it was really an opportunity to kind of find a musical capturing of the beautiful textual sound world, and to create this grouping of 4 songs that plays almost as one longer piece of music. One of the things I wrote in the score between some of the movements is that the pianist and singer are to move from one piece to the next, and without a break, the word attacca. And so actually the last note of several of the pieces of music actually resolves with the first note of the next piece of music. So they're really meant to be interlaced together, and one cohesive whole.
That's going to be great. And that's going to be premiering on Friday, May 12th at 7:30 p.m. And Ian is going to be joining us in Vancouver for this. So this is going to be great to have the composer there for the world premiere. And how do you develop the relationship with the text that you're setting to music?
One of the things I really do is I spend a lot of time in the text, just reading it, rereading it, scanning it. I often have a printed paper version of the text for quite a time before I start writing any music, and I'll jot little ideas. Sometimes it's a feeling, sometimes it's a color or a word like icy. Icy might be a way that I'll give myself a musical clue as I go to set the text for sort of a color or a sound world that I'm thinking about when I'm reading it. But one of the things I always do with text, and is really important in my operatic work, is really to use the text as a guide. It becomes my roadmap, and the way that I structure the music, the way that I use musical form, really comes from the poetic form and structures that are there. And Ondaatje is great because he'll often offset the text of a line. So, he'll write a small paragraph or, a few lines of text, and then he'll give a break. And then the next line will be as though you were indenting it on a computer, indented about 10 spaces. So the next sort of section of text is offset. And, when you read it, you either give yourself a pause there, or you think about what that might mean. And for me, it's kind of when I get to spend time in a text like these beautiful Ondaatje words, I think about, well, maybe what was he meaning or intending with that space, and how could that transform into a musical space, or maybe it's a musical silence. So it's just fun playing with the text and using it as roadmap.
So actually the form of the poem gives you a clue for the musical form later as well.
Absolutely.
That's very cool.
and the fun thing too is getting to play against that at times. So sometimes the formal structure isn't terribly clear, or it's fairly free form, and then either I can choose to sort of follow that, or I can push against that and either impose or bring another musical form to bear on that same text. And so there's a way, a fun way of playing and pushing and pulling with the form that's there, that I really love with setting text for song.
Well, as someone who loves music and loves written languages, this is kind of like my bread and butter too, is how do we bring the sound world and the world of literature and text together? I'm going to dig into a few more serious questions. What are some of the deep questions you think that arts organizations and opera companies across Canada should be asking themselves right now?
Oh, you're just asking impossible questions. I think so, the real big questions is what does our existence mean going forward, and maybe even looking back, like, why do we exist as an organization? What is our purpose? And who do we want to be? I think that's a really broad question. Who do we want to be? And can be answered in so many different ways. I mean, it reflects the type of programming that an arts organization will do, the types of artists that it engages, the areas of questioning and interest that they'll pursue. And all of those pursuits shape the future of the arts. It's I think through the collection of a lot of arts organizations doing that we get, the roadmap for the future of the arts. So who are we? Who do we want to be? And what does the future of our art form look like? I think a lot of people asking that question could yield some really beautiful results.
And I think that since the pandemic slowed down operations, at least until we figured out how to turn on a camera and record concerts, and then operations got very busy all at once, I think that the pandemic afforded us that opportunity to slow down and ask these larger questions.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the pandemic was a reset for so many people in so many ways, right? Arts organizations, individual musicians, so many of our colleagues pivoted and started doing other things, or started to think about their own values. I was talking with one singer based out of Toronto who has a wife and children, and he was saying that this was a real opportunity to question how much he'd been traveling for his singing. And I mean, he was doing very well and is doing very well and was able to travel all the time. But for him, it was a chance to say, when I was stuck at home, I really had the chance with my family to reassess what was important, and do I want to be on the road that much, and what would it look like to shape an artistic life that had more balance. So I think those kind of questions have been really, really important for individual artists, but also larger organizations to say, who are we? Let's take stock of where we're at. And again, like we were saying earlier, who do we want to be?
That makes good sense. Can you tell us about your recent time at the Banff Center, my favorite place on earth?
One of the most glorious places. I love the Banff Center. I've been there a number of times. Once, my first time actually was only in 2019. And it was the gathering of Indigenous classical musicians, most of whom were composers. And that group, I mean, that meeting was a kind of seminal event in a lot of our lives, because it brought together Indigenous classical composers that beforehand were not well connected. Some of us knew each other or knew each other from a distance, but we got to spend several weeks together talking. We created work together. We performed together. We wrote a manifesto of what we wanted in the artistic world, in the artistic landscape, especially as organizations interfaced and or commissioned us and that sort of thing. So it was just such an encouraging time. I mean, those are some dear friends, and we are still connected. We still support one another in our work. We, when we're overwhelmed, we'll reach out to one another for support. When we're frustrated, or when we are overwhelmed in the sense that we have too much work, we'll often say, "Hey, why don't you work with this other this person here? They're a dear friend and they're amazing." in their work that you may not know of. So it's been a really great networking and support group of friends. And but I've also been back. I went once on a writing retreat, and I had one of those lovely Leighton studios that are these little studios in the woods, and I began writing an opera there. The work of the sea, which was just premiered in Toronto. I wrote the first 15 minutes of music there on a little retreat. And I've been back as well for Opera in the 21st Century, which is a program that's really considering what is the future of opera and what does it mean to be braving the next 400 years of the operatic art form. So I've really had some wonderful experiences there, and I treasure my time in Banff, and just I almost wish I could be there all the time.
I do too. And I would just have the lowest temperature not be minus 25 in the dead of winter.
That's right. I know I've been in February, like, oh boy, this is some cold.
It gets pretty chilly. And I just would love to ask, what do you want settler-run organizations to know? Like, what would you share with us?
Another brilliant question. I'd say, especially settler organizations that are wanting to do more work with Indigenous artists and creatives, I would say, first of all, bravo for that, and please continue doing that, because I think it's important work. I think the key thing in any type of engagement that way, especially between settler organizations and Indigenous artists, creatives, is about relationship. There have been, when the group that I mentioned earlier met, one of the things we spoke about in Banff was how sometimes it could feel very much like a drop in the bucket, or not a drop in the bucket, a really quick interaction that felt more extractive than it did collaborative. So, hey, can we hire you or put you on this project? By the way, the project grant is due tomorrow. Can you be a part of it? And so immediately you feel like, well, you're putting my name on that to be like a sexier grant application.
That's alarming.
Yeah. And also then you go, well, what is this project? Am I even important in this project? Do you want my artistic sensibility, or do you just want my name on it? And then the other times that can be a little discouraging is when an event comes along, a person is brought in for a quick thing, and then they're out, and then they're never asked. There's no extended relationship beyond that initial touch point, and that I think every Indigenous artist has experienced that. First of all, secondly, we all know when it's happening. The third thing is that we all talk to each other about it. So it becomes like most of us wouldn't want to work with organizations that have a track record of doing that kind of work. Now, I say that, but that also, thankfully, is not the only experience that exists. This experience, for example, with Muse West has been an incredible one of building relationship, talking over extended period of time, thinking about how to do work well together, and really a generative collaborative experience where all of the players involved, Asita, Les, yourself, myself, are really invited to really craft what the event becomes and what the piece becomes. And that's the way that we should, in my opinion, that's the way we should be making all work.
You're here. Thank you for that. And I feel that as Canadian businesses and schools and arts organizations and other nonprofit entities continue or begin or deepen their reconciliation journey, I think it's so important to be collaborative and to build rapport and to keep those relationships going, because I think that otherwise it can feel transactional.
Yep.
And that doesn't help build people's morale.
Right. Yeah, and it becomes more, I think, performative reconciliation rather than a true kind of sustained commitment to reconciliation, because reconciliation is not done through an event. It is done through a sustained, ongoing, multi-year commitment, really multi-generational commitment to reconciliation. And then I feel like then you can use that word. But if it's just a, throw something up, put it together quick, then I don't feel like we earn the word reconciliation, because that's not what that work really needs to look like.
And it really does take conversations. So we're really grateful for this time to share about that. And we're going to close our interview with a few more rapid fun questions. What is some of your... No worries. They'll be easy. What are two of your favorite novels?
I'm currently reading Haruki Murakami's IQ84, which I am loving. I'm 1,000 pages in, and I have about 200 to go, and I'm sad that it's going to end in 200 pages. Another great. I've also been reading some genre fiction that's like sort of thriller novels, the ones that are mass produced kind of thing by, and I've read a number of them recently that really just, you read in 2 sittings kind of thing. It's a good balance to me.
Yes, for sure. Those make a lot of sense, balancing themselves together. And if you had a choice to visit the West Coast of Canada or the East Coast, which would you pick? And this is not a trick question.
Okay, yeah. Well, I feel like now I get in trouble. Love my East Coast peeps, but the West Coast for sure. I mean, how could I say anything different being here right now?
In beautiful Victoria. Well, we wish you all the best on your premiere with the Victoria Symphony. What is the title of the piece?
The piece is called Le Loup de la Fontaine, or The Wolf of La Fontaine. It's a story from my community, of the Georgian Bay Métis community, and it's been choreographed by the incredible Wenwei Wang. Ballet Edmonton dancers are dancing at the Victoria Symphony's performing it. It is truly an exciting work, and again, another awesome opportunity to bring Indigenous storytelling, settler organizations together to do really cool and collaborative work.
Amazing. Please tell Matthew that we say hi.
Absolutely will.
Thank you so much. And thank you to our audience for listening to our podcast today. Our podcast producer is right behind me, and his name is Josh Short. Thank you, Josh. We would like to thank Tom Lee Music for the microphones, and also the Canada Council for their support of today's podcast. My name is Jennifer West. We hope to see you at the world premiere of Love Songs by Michael Ondaatje, composed by Ian Cusson, on Friday, May 12th at the Annex on Smythe. Seymour and Robson, between Robson and Smythe, at 7:30 p.m. And thank you, everybody. This has been another episode of Take Note. Thank you, Ian.
Bye-bye.